Hello, everyone, and welcome. Whether you're watching this webinar live online or you're watching its recording. My name is Adolfo Sanchez Cuadrado. I am a lecturer in linguistics at the University of Granada, Spain, and I will be hosting today. Before introducing today's webinar and speakers, let me give you a bit of context. The Arqus Alliance is a multilateral alliance of 9 institutions in the tertiary level which share academic, scientific, and cultural objectives, a common vision of the role of higher education and research, and mutual fields of interests. Today's webinar is part of the guest lecture series 9 months, 9 universities, offered in the framework of the Plurilingual and Intercultural Hub of the Alliance. This hub is one of the work groups of the Alliance, and it aims to promote plurilingualism within the 9 institutions and to capitalize on students, researchers, and staff's competence in different languages, as well as to foster their intercultural competence, one of the soft skills much needed for today's society. These lectures focus on specific topics related to language and culture and target mainly graduate and postgraduate students, as well as early-stage researchers and academic staff. The lectures are intended to generate awareness and appreciation for the topic of multilingualism, as well as an understanding of the many areas of our lives that are related to and influenced by language. Let me now introduce today's speakers, Professor David Porcel Bueno from the University of Granada, and postdoctoral researchers Stefan Koch and Katharina Gerhalter, both from the University of Graz. David Porcel Bueno, in a minute they will be up with us. David Porcel Bueno from the University of Granada is currently assistant professor at the Department of Romance, Italian, Galician-Portuguese and Catalan Philology. His research focuses on the Ibero-Romance languages and literatures, Spanish, Portuguese, Galician, especially in their medieval and classical phases, and on the relationship with other languages which are or have been present on the Iberian Peninsula, Arabic, Hebrew, and medieval Latin, and with other Romance, Italian, Occitan, and French languages and literatures. Stefan Koch, from the University of Graz, is currently a postdoctoral researcher and project coordinator, co-director, at the University of Graz. Okay, now we all are here. Hi. Hello.
Hi.
Okay, so I just introduced David, okay, and Stefan. Hi, Stefan. As I was saying, he's currently a postdoctoral researcher and project co-director at the University of Graz. His research focuses on the history of Spanish and other Ibero-Romance languages, especially Leonese, and on Italo-Romance languages, especially Southern Italian varieties, for example, Neapolitan. His work draws on field research, be it in historical documents, for example, scripture, in archives, or in the locations where these languages are spoken. And last but not least, Katharina Gerhalter, sorry for my pronunciation in German, sorry, from the University of Graz, is currently a postdoctoral researcher at the Department of Romance Languages and Literatures of the University of Graz. Her research focuses on Spanish, Portuguese, and French, with an emphasis on theoretical models of language change, as well as on discourse and pragmatics, with a strong background in corpus linguistics. The three of them, David, Stefan, and Katharina, are the board members of the Arqus International Forum on Romance Studies. And with this network, they have organized several joint research and teaching activities with a strong pan-Romance perspective. In addition to the main Romance languages, these activities also focus on Romance regional and minority languages. Okay, they are about to deliver the following webinar entitled Intercomprehension, Language Contact and Plurilingualism in Romance-Speaking Europe. I won't take much time from them. I will just say that the webinar focuses on the parallelism and intercomprehension among Romance languages from a historical linguistics perspective. And just a couple of notes. The webinar will be delivered mainly in English, but David, Stefan, and Katharina will also be resorting to other 3 languages, Spanish, Italian, and Portuguese, when commenting on some of the examples, which is an excellent instance of the spirit of this webinar series. That is, to bring to light how multilingualism, that is the presence of different languages, and plurilingualism, in this case, the connections between languages, for example, as part of the plurilingual repertoire of speakers, can play a major role in today's society. So before giving the screen to them, I remind you that you can leave any comments or questions you may have in the comments box during the presentation, and I will pass them on to the speakers at the end. And you can also leave questions, have questions at the end of the presentation for the Q&A section. So, well, dear David, Stefan, Katharina, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us today. And without further ado, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Adolfo.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, everybody.
Welcome.
So, well, I will start with repeating the title, Intercomprehension, Language Contact, Plurilingualism in Roman-speaking Europe. Thank you very much again to Adolfo for the nice introduction. We're very honored to be here and to be able to share our research, our thoughts. I will stay at the beginning. Obviously, this is a very big topic and we can only present a small bit of it. So we will be concentrating on lexicon, which means vocabulary. Ultimately, that's words, because it's the easiest accessible discipline in linguistics, and even for a non-linguistic audience, this is very accessible. So it will be about the lexicon, it will be about words. And before we actually start, we will talk 1 minute or 2 about the context in which this research, in which these collaborations are embedded. And that is where I give over to David. And on the next slide, yes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Stefan. Good afternoon, everyone. Indeed, plurilingualism and multilingualism is the most important point of this bottom-up initiative, as minority and minoritized languages coexist with one or even several majority languages. The initiative arose after the publication by the European Commission of the latest version of the European Charter for Regional or Minority Languages, and the launch of the cycle revitalizing minority and minoritized languages in Europe. Within the Arqus International Forum on Romance Studies. In this context, we thought that as professor of Roman languages, we should research, teach, and pronounce the minority and minoritized languages of Spain, Italy, Portugal, or French, among other. Later, in a map to be shown by my colleague Stefan, we will be able to see some of them. In some cases, I have been asked what the difference is between minority and minoritized languages. Although both conditions may be present in a language, for example, Asturiano, Gallego, Aranese, the terms minority and minoritized are not synonymous. If you will allow me, I will read a brief definition of each one of them. I'm sorry, but I only have the Galician version of European Charter for regional or minority languages, but I think it is perfectly understandable. Minority or regional languages are, I read, lenguas faladas tradicionalmente num territorio dun Estado por nacionais deste Estado que constitúen un grupo numéricamente inferior ao resto da poboación do Estado. On the other hand, the term minoritized languages means língua cujo uso estivo ou está restringido por motivos políticos ou sociais. I think this difference is very important to understand the phenomenon of minority of minoritized languages. I will not go on any longer, so I will give the floor again to my colleague Stefan Koch.
Yes, and this bottom-up initiative, thank you, David, is embedded in the Arqus International Forum for Romance Studies, which has been mentioned and presented by Adolfo before, so I won't keep talking about that much longer. However, it also has a webpage where recent events can be seen, can be followed. And as you can see in the top of the list, there is workshops on research and teaching on minority languages in Europe. And this is also the context in which is embedded this webinar. So if we can continue. Thank you. Just, well, this is a map created by the Arqus University Alliance to show where the different universities are located. And in this case, this is Granada, because David is obviously from the University of Granada. And on the next page, we see the University of Graz in Austria. So this map is also interesting for another reason, which is directly connected with this talk, with this webinar. So if we look at these countries, these are the countries in which the 9 Arqus universities are located. And if we look at them, we see that of the 9 countries, 4 of them we have Portugal, Spain, France, and Italy are Roman-speaking countries. So if you count the countries of the Arqus University Alliance, already 170 million speakers speak Romance languages. So it is the Romance languages are the most important languages in the Arqus University Alliance, and they are also a very good object for research for what we want to do, which we will see in a minute. So let's, before we start with the actual topic, let's shortly talk about Romance languages. So if you can pass on to the next slide, thank you very much. So on this map, you see all the Romance languages in Europe. And well, at the first glance, if you look at the frames of some of the states like Spain, France, Italy, and Romania, Romania has an orange frame.
Sorry,
Spain.
Stefan.
Yes, no,
no, sorry.
Just a second.
We have in this map, for example, many minority and minority languages. For example, Galician in the Peninsula Iberica, Asturian, Fala, Extremeña, Aranés, also in Italian. Sorry.
Exactly. I was about to say that as well. Thank you, David. So the minority languages David mentioned before can be very clearly seen in this map as well. But within larger territories, which are framed in green and orange, etc., which are the state boundaries of Spain, France, Italy, and Romania. But we see within these bigger frames, we have lots of different Romance languages. Some of them are considered dialects, but they are, in fact, real full-fledged languages. David mentioned the minority languages in Spain. If we look at southern Italy, it says Neapolitan. Well, actually, it's much more fine-graded. So one thing which we have to comment, because we do not agree with this classification, the map itself is very good and gives you a very good image of Romance languages and dialects in Europe. However, the classification above is something we would not agree with to 100%. For example, we wouldn't speak of Occitan Romance. Catalan would be considered Ibero-Romance and the rest Gallo-Romance.
Gallo-Romance.
And we would probably not speak of Italo-Dalmatian, especially because Dalmatian does not exist anymore. So the classifications you can discuss, but the map itself is very good. So was there something else you wanted to add, David?
No, simply.
Okay. So if you can pass on to the next page, why are they called Romance languages? Obviously, it has to do with Rome, so it has to do with Latin. They are all based on Latin. And as we can see in this page, we see in red the territories that had been conquered by the Romans in the course of the centuries. And obviously, they brought their language Latin to all of these regions. And the areas in stripes, in blue stripes and in yellow stripes, are the ones where still Romance languages are spoken. Romance languages based on Latin. So what we can basically say, the Romance languages actually are Latin. They are still Latin. They just have evolved over 2,000 years. And nowadays, well, for those of you who are familiar with some of them, like French or Spanish, you might say, well, they sound quite differently. That is correct. I will come back to that in a second. But what unites them is they are all based on Latin, and a high degree, very high amount of Latin words are the same in all of these languages, which obviously facilitates intercomprehension, which is one of the topics of this talk. On the other hand, these phonetic differences that are rooted already in the beginning of the Latin languages or Latin language in these regions, they make it more difficult for intercomprehension. So I wanted to talk a bit more about that, but maybe we can do this in the discussion. So let's go on for now. Just to situate the Romance languages within the languages of the world and within the Indo-European branch of the languages, we have this nice picture of a tree. And there at the top right, we see all the Romance languages, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, and the different branches within the Romance branch, so to speak, also represent more or less in a good way which languages are closer related, which are not as close related, etc. Of course, there are many other Indo-European languages, as the Germanic languages on the right, the Slavic languages on the right and on the left, etc. Okay, so let's delve into the Romance languages on the next page. So, as I said, to a high degree, the lexicon, the words are still the same in these languages, although they are pronounced differently. But this makes the core of these languages, and this is the reason why we consider them related, and why intercomprehension is possible as soon as you're used to the pronunciation of the word in a certain language. So if we, for example, look at this inherited lexicon from Latin in all Romance languages, we have Latin panem, which means bread. By the way, we always cite the accusative for those who are familiar with Latin, because the accusative case is the only case that remained in the Romance languages. We do not have any case system anymore in the Romance language, majority at least. So we have panem, bread, which is Portuguese pão, Spanish pan, Catalan pa, Italian pane, French pain, Romanian paine. So we see the pronunciation is different, but it all comes from the same word, Latin panem. The same goes for Latin matrem, mother, which is Portuguese mai, Spanish madre, Catalan mare, Italian madre, French mère. And finally, we have a very particular case, especially because it very well shows how the development over 2,000 years based on a Latin, which was not the native language of many speakers, caused that maybe sometimes the same word cannot be recognized in one or two languages, and you have to study that actively. So we have Latin aquam, which is water, and we have, again, in Portuguese, agua, Spanish agua, Catalan agua, Italian aqua, Roman apa, but we have French, which is a bit special. And I think a picture says more than 1,000 words, as they say. So if you're not familiar with French, it will be very difficult to relate eau with Latin aqua, right? But for the rest of the Romance languages, the intercomprehension is still very clear, especially for a concept such essential for human life as water. Okay, so let's continue. So we have seen on the one hand, we have a genetic relationship. We have a high degree of shared lexicon, the same words just pronounced in a different way. And it is these words that obviously are common in all the Romance languages, and this is not what we will concentrate on. But once the Romance languages have distinguished themselves as proper languages on their own, which are different from the other Romance languages, let's say in the Middle Ages, then again, obviously lexical borrowings, or let's say words can come from one language to another again. And this is what we will be concentrating on, right? How different words from certain Romance languages entered other Romance languages, and how that also affected other European languages. And this is the point where I give the word to Katharina.
Okay, thank you very much. So to start with, why are there lexical borrowings? So why do we borrow words at all? So the first case or the first reason are new concepts or new reference. So if there is a new thing, a new concept, you don't know a certain language, a certain culture doesn't know it, doesn't have it. So if they take a new concept, adopt a new word, a new plant, a new animal, you might also adapt the name it has. So together with a new concept, you adopt a new word. But there's a second reason, which is prestige. So some languages have a very high cultural prestige, and languages might borrow words from a prestigious language, even when they have their own word. So even when they already have a word for a certain concept, they might borrow a new word from another language just because this other language is so prestigious. So what we want to show you in this talk is the contribution of Romance languages, specifically Italian, French, and Spanish, to a pan-European common lexicon. So let's look at vocabulary that is shared by many European languages. And we will also see how Romance languages acted as gateways for words from other non-European languages to enter Europe and European languages. And it's also important to note that lexical borrowings and loanwords are not a new phenomenon. So it's not something that is happening only right now as something new, but we will see that this has been happening already since the Middle Ages. And so language context, language borrowing is a very old phenomenon. And we will also see that it's not restricted to English. So because today many people criticize English and say that there are too many English words in Spanish, in German, in French, so we are overwhelmed by English. But as we will see, also the Romance languages during history had or have exported a lot of words. So it's not just an English phenomenon, but we will see it's also a Romance phenomenon. Yeah, let's start with let's go by a historical perspective. So we start chronologically with the Middle Ages, and our first point will be Spanish, and we will see in a minute why, because it's a very special situation, and David is just the perfect expert to talk and to explain us what is special about Spanish language contact in the Middle Ages.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Katharina. Yes, one of the most important differences between Spanish and other Roman languages is the high number of Arabism that exists today and that have existed throughout its history. Indeed, Spanish has been a real gateway for Arabic loanwords. The slide shows two classic dates. The year 711, when the Arabs and the Berbers conquered the Iberian Peninsula, and the year 1492, when the Catholic kings conquered the last Muslim kingdom in Europe, the kingdom of Granada. But the influence of the Arabic language on Spanish does not end in 1492. Should be extended at least until the expulsion of the Moriscos. I don't know how to say Moriscos in English. Moriscos or
Morisco.
I would say so, yes. Yeah.
Moriscos. Okay, expulsion of the Moriscos in 1613. Therefore, the Arabic loanword from Spanish have their own chronology. The Mozarabic period, which is the earliest period, the Mudéjar period, and the Morisco or Moors period. It should also be borne in mind that most of the Arabic words in Spanish don't come directly from classical Arabic, from Fusha, but from the Andalusi dialect, the Arabic spoken on the Iberian Peninsula. These Arabisms are mainly linguistic loanwords for new concepts related to trade, administration, warfare, science, agriculture, etc. Many loanwords from Arabic are themselves loanwords from Persia, Greek, Sanskrit, or even from Latin itself. This case be seen in the following slide on the word apricot. The word of Latin origin, praecocia, passed into Greek. Firstly, praecokion, bericokia. Then into Arabic, from Greek to Arabic, barkuk, al is the article, from Arabic into Spanish, albaricoquín, with the article origin, article in Arabic, and from Spanish into other European languages, where apricot, apricose in German, apricot. In the following slide, we can see that the main characteristics of the Arabism in Spanish is the original Arabic article. Some specialists consider that this is due to the influence of the Berbers, but I don't agree so much. You can see in the following words the article: albaricoque, árabe fusha barkut, baricoque al sería el artículo en español, alcohol del árabe kuhl, nuevamente con el artículo, algodón de cotton, alcachofa de shaf, azúcar de zúcar, probably Persia shakar o sánscrito sharkara, cifra, Arabic cifr, árabe fusha, cifr, guitarra, Arabian guitarra, naranja, naranj, en árabe, also laranj, o del sánscrito laranja. Finally, it should be noted that Arabic loanwords are pan-European. There are present in many languages, included the languages of the Arqus Alliance, as the following slide shows. For example, Spanish, alcohol, algodón, cifra, azúcar, guitarra, naranja. Portuguese, alcohol, algodão, cifra, azúcar, guitarra, laranja, alcachofra. Italian, alcohol, cotone, cifra. French, Romanian, German, English, Polish, Lithuanian. We must not forget that this loanword from Arabic into Romanian German, English, Polish, or Lithuanian are due to French. They are therefore indirect Arabism. Yeah, continue.
Okay, thank you very much, David. So Arabisms are not the only extra-European loanwords Spanish is responsible for. Spanish is also responsible for transmitting a lot of loanwords from the Amerindian languages, so from the Americas. After Christopher Columbus arrived in America and during the colonization and conquer of the Americas, the Spaniards found themselves with many new plants, new animals, things they didn't know. So all these concepts were adopted from Amerindian, indigenous American languages into Spanish, and then they passed from Spanish to French, and again from French to German, English, and so on. For example, from the Caribbean region, we had languages like Taíno and Caribe, and from these two languages, Spanish adopted canoa, maíz, batata, tabaco, barbacoa, hamaca, caimán, caníbal, and piragua. And as you can see, some of these words sound familiar also in English, for example. Then from Nahuatl, which is the indigenous language of today's Mexico, the Aztecs, the Spanish took words and concepts like tomate, aguacate, cacao, chocolate, and finally from Quechua, which is the language spoken, or which is always still spoken in the Andean region, we have words like alpaca, condor, mate, papa, pampa, and cuca, which is coca, for example, in Coca-Cola. So you see here that we have two words for potato. So we have a Taíno word which is batata, and we have a Quechua word, papa, and the Spanish patata is a blend. So it mixes these two words, batata, which nowadays is more or less sweet potato in Spanish, and papa, which is also still used in America and in Andalusian, for example. So patata and potato is a mix, a blend of two indigenous words, batata and papa. Yeah. So let's come back to Europe. Yeah, we coming back to Europe. So let's start with the next big culture, which was very relevant for for Europe in general, which is Italy. So Stefan, thank you.
Thank you very much. So yes, and by coming back to Europe, we also change perspective, because until now we have seen how a Romance language, in this case Spanish, through its colonies became a gateway for extra-European words, as well as because it was conquered by the Arabs for Arabic words. So now we return the perspective and show how some Romance languages contributed to a pan-European lexicon, or how some Romance languages contributed to the existence of words in other Romance languages. Now we have to imagine, to begin with, that although all the Romance languages are based on Latin, although they share a great amount of words of Latin origin, some Romance languages continued some words, and some other Romance languages continued other words for the same meaning. So it is by the way of other Romance languages that certain words may re-enter a Romance language that had abandoned this word, but then had this word anew, but with a different meaning than it had before in Latin. So this is what we will concentrate on the one hand, and on the other hand, we will see how much in certain periods, certain Romance languages not only influenced other Romance languages, but the whole of Europe. It usually has to do with a certain status, with prestige, as Katharina and David also alluded to. So if we look at Italian loanwords in European languages, there is one period which is essential for all over Europe, and that is the Renaissance. So obviously the Renaissance starts in Italy in 1400 and more extends itself to other Roman-speaking countries, obviously, like France, and from there all over Europe. But Italy is, and especially northern Italy, Tuscany is the driving force of the Renaissance and accordingly of humanism, which is the rediscovery of the classical authors of classic knowledge, classic science from the antiquities. It was also it had a boost, so to speak, this Italomania in Europe, when Katharina de Medicis became Queen of France by marrying the French king. And with her, many artisans, many scientists from Italy went to the French court, and with them, they brought many technical terms, many words that were not used as such in French or had ceased to exist in French because the concepts were known, the societal conditions were different, same goes for Spain. And then they brought these words to France. Obviously, these words had remained in Italian, only changed the meaning slightly for over 2,000 years. But in the other Romance languages, they either had been abandoned or were not used with the meaning that the Italians brought to these countries. So it is not only, well, if we speak about Italian, we cannot say it's Italian in the modern sense. We have to speak about Tuscan first, which obviously is the basis for modern Italian. And since Tuscany is the center of Renaissance, that does not surprise. But we also have to speak about Genoese, Venetian, Neapolitan, Sicilian, and so on. They all contributed to the other Romance languages as Italo-Romance. And the good thing about these Italian loanwords is, I will read out many of them now, is we don't even need translations. Even if you're not speaking a Romance language, you will probably recognize all of them. So this shows what an impact the Italian Renaissance and later on the lexicon created in this time and brought to other countries had on all over Europe, not only on France and then on Spain, all over Europe. So classically, if we think about this movement of scientists, of artisans, of artists from Italy to the French court, there are certain domains where such lexical borrowing is very common. And David also mentioned it in the part on Arab. It is the same thing. So obviously, we have a lot of words regarding music, literature, and art, which is, for example, this is just a selection, of course, concerto, contrabbasso, serenata, trombone, sonetto, terzetto, duetto, busto, novella, caricatura, miniatura, modello, opera. I suppose you all know these words. You just pronounce them differently in your respective languages. Now, this is one thing. Then there is general life at the court. And this consists also of many feasts, celebrations, etc., traditions. So the Italians also brought to France carnevale, maschera, balletto, buffone, which is the buffoon, a clown, festa, corteggio, cortesia, burlesco, grotesco, gioviale, interesse. Now, interesse is a very special case because obviously it existed already in Latin as a word and means taking part in something. And if it is really brought from Italy to French, or if it is a word from French philosophical discourse, etc., is not quite clear. And many other words I just read out, they have existed in Italy for a long time. Many of them come from Latin, some of them even from Greek, but in the other Romance languages in Europe, they hadn't existed until they were brought there or re-entered them via Italian, okay? Even the tradition of Carnevale probably existed in other countries. It was just not called Carnevale, okay? So If you go a bit further, we have some words from architecture, like the word architecture itself, stemming from Greek, obviously, but then brought as a concept to other European countries, and especially France. We have architettura. Then we have appartamento, arcata, balcone, balaustra, belvedere, facciata, stucco. Maybe these are more technical terms, but I think you are still familiar with them, at least most of them. And finally, we have many loanwords from Italian that concern war, seafaring, and trade. Obviously, trade, as Tuscany in the Renaissance was the center of banking in Europe. This is not surprise. So we have battaglione, cavalleria, casamatta, colonnello, attacco, fregata, gondola, and also pilota, which obviously meant something else than the modern day pilot, but someone who pilots a ship, for example. And in the domain of trade, we have banco, bancarotta, contrabbando, credito, fattura, saldo. Now, I will maybe close with an anecdote. Bancarotta is a very funny word because supposedly the banks in Tuscany in the Renaissance had actual banks where the customers could wait. And if it was said that a bank couldn't pay anymore, many people came to get their money out of the bank, and they were sitting on these banks, and supposedly they broke. So if those banks broke, meant the bank itself couldn't pay anymore. Okay, let's continue with the next slide. It started in the Renaissance, but Italian culture, Italian concepts, Italian political concepts have been exported ever since, although with the big waves of migration that affected Italy, and Italians went all over the world, especially to the Americas as well. So Italian is not only a source for pan-European lexicon, but for, I may call them, internationalism. So, for example, we know fascismo, which comes from Italian fascio, again from Latin fascis, which is related with the Roman office of the lictors, and they had a bundle with an axe in it as a sign for their office. So this is where it comes from originally. Then we have partigiano, which means partisan. So someone who follows a certain party or its directives, or on the other hand, someone who's fighting for his convictions in the hidden. So guerrilla, in Spanish you would say a guerrillero, right? Then everyone knows pasta, everyone eats pasta, which comes basically from Latin pasta, which just dough dough or porridge. And supposedly Marco Polo brought the recipe for pasta, as it is known in Italy now, to Italy, and then, well, pasta conquered the world, and it's called like that ever since, everywhere on the globe. We have pizza. Pizza is maybe even more famous, and everyone knows it, but no one knows where it comes from, actually. The only thing is, we know at a certain point, it was not only a Neapolitan word, but an Italian word. And that is how it spread to Europe. So we have either it has to do with ancient Greek pita, which still exists, some kind of bread. It may have to do with the Neapolitan word pizza, which means to pluck. And it may also have to do with the already Latin word pinza, which exists as pinza in northern Italy or pinza in southern Austria. It's also some kind of bread. If you look at the picture, it's obviously not a pizza, it's more a focaccia, or actually a pinza. So you see, it's similar, the concept, but not quite the same, and it's difficult to trace down exactly where it comes from, the word pizza. And finally, we have spaghetti, a type of pasta which has become famous, obviously, and which simply comes from Italian spago, which is string, and is still used in Neapolitan as an abbreviation. For example, you can say in Neapolitan, facciamo uno spago, which means let's make some spaghetti to eat, right? Okay, let's finish with the spaghetti. And now we talked a lot about France as a vehicular country and language for Italianisms, but French itself contributed to a pan-European lexicon. and also to the lexicon of other Romance languages. And this is what Katharina will be talking about now.
Okay, thank you. So let's see which words we have from French. Of course, as Stefan already said, France has been very important already since the late Middle Ages, and we have primarily loanwords in the domains of military, trade, church, nobility, and society. But from the 17th century onwards, French becomes the lingua franca of Europe. So European nobility, European educated burghers, they learn French. It was en vogue, it was cool, or how you would call it today, to speak French. Yeah. So from the 17th century onward, and mainly during the 18th century, a lot of French words entered Europe. The 18th century is important because France was leading in certain political movements like absolutism, Enlightenment, of course, French Revolution. So there was a political power of France, of course. And also, if we speak about linguistics, the 18th century is important because it's the century of language normalization, language standardization. I can't pronounce it in English. So the standard languages were mostly fixed during the 18th century. Okay, so let's look at some French loanwords. From the military, we have brigade, cadet, commandé, déserté. As Stefan did before, I won't translate it. I think you can just figure out what these words mean or how you pronounce it in your own languages. From the domain of fashion, we have corset, bijoux, pantalon. Yeah, so I think you know these words. From housing and culinary, we have chalet, hôtel, bureau, canapé, bouteille, croquette, and there are also other words like favorite, galante, and silhouette. Then, like the Italian architecture, French was bureaucratie. So the French word bureaucratie is a French loanword in Europe, together with finance, guarantee, comité, départ, parlement. Then we have some behaviors like routine, intrigue, avant-garde. Then a very nice example is camouflage. Camouflage comes from the French verb camoufler, so to weave, to camouflage, which itself is an Italian word camuffare, disguise, which comes from Middle Latin muffola. So muffola is a scarf, a shawl. So camouflage is covering up yourself with a scarf. Another nice example is sabotage. So for example, sabotaje in Spanish. This word comes from sabaton. Sabaton is a certain type of shoe, a shoe with a platter covering, which were used in the medieval ages and later on also for workers. So this sabaton, etymologically, it's the same word, or it's related to Portuguese and French, Portuguese and Spanish sapato, yeah, sapato, shoe, sabaton in French, and also the Italian ciabatta, but in Italian ciabatta is a type of bread. So mixing up with pita, pizza, pinza, we also add ciabatta. So for Italian, it wasn't a shoe, it was a bread, yeah, which looked like a shoe. Okay, so these shoes, these sabatons, were used to destroy on purpose the work you have done. So this is sabotage. Yeah, you destroy the work you have done before. Yes, then we have also some other loanwords from the 19th and 20th century from French. For example, from technology, we have avion, which is a neologism from avem actionem, so the bird and action, yeah, the bird action flying. Then we have bicyclette, we have garage from garer, which is to store something, from Old French barrer, to defend oneself. And this word is itself a loan word from Germanic. In German, we have wehren, so to defend, Gothic wahren. So this is a Germanism, then it's a French word. Then the French built garage, and the French garage is exported to other languages. So once again, we have this movement through Europe. Yeah, from fashion and culinary, we have marron, beige, we have champagne, champignon, pâté, restaurant, we have bébé, tourisme. All these are French words exported into Europe. A very nice example is boutique. So the French word boutique seems it seems that it comes from Provençal, Occitan, so it's not a northern French word, but it's from a today regional minority language, Provençal, Occitan, botica. Botica is a shop. Yeah, it's a Greek word, so the Greek apotheke or theke is just a warehouse, a storage, a shop. And etymologically, it's related to Spanish bodega. So the Spanish bodega is etymologically related to botica, and from botica, the French created boutique.
Apotheca.
Yeah? And yeah,
Serbian,
and
for example.
Yeah, it's nice. So the Spanish use it for wine, the wine cellar. The French use boutique for shopping. In German, I have to say we use Apotheke for the pharmacy. So you also use it for storage, but for the pharmacy and not for wine. So this word has a very nice and a very interesting story, which continues with discothèque and bibliothèque. So bibliothèque is also the thèque, a storage for books. And in French, they created during the 19th and 20th century the new neologism discothèque. So discothèque is a storage, a shop for discs, for music discs. So this apotheke, discothèque, bibliothèque seems to have a very widespread history in Europe. Another neologism from French is cinema, from the Greek cinematograph. So kinematos, which is movement, moving, and graphein, which is writing. Yeah. So you see, we have neologisms made out of Greek words, but these are new words created in France, and then from France they were exported to Europe. Yeah, so we come to an overview. Yeah, and what we have seen is that throughout the history, several European and specifically Romance countries have had a high prestige in Europe and were responsible for a lot of loanwords. We've seen that Italy was predominant during the Renaissance, Spain, especially during the colonization of the Americas. So Spain is responsible for importing a lot of words from America, and even before, during the Middle Ages, already for words from Arabic. Then we have seen France during the 17th, 18th, 19th century. So we see that Italian, Spanish, and French have been important during the history of Europe. And in comparison, English is more recent. So English gains more weight with Great Britain and the industrialization in the 18th or more or less the 19th century. We should also mention that German during the 19th century was quite important in Europe. So German was the language for science, for philosophy during the 19th century. And as we know it today, the United States of America, became more popular from a cultural perspective since World War II. So we see that this panorama has changed quite a lot. Yeah, at the end, we want to show you some recommended readings. So if you want to find out more about these histories, about these words, you can check these publications. Yeah, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you, Katharina. We don't have time. Very, very, very quickly, we finish with a quiz. What is the origin, Adolfo, of the word marmalade?
We can we show the slides? Yeah, thank you.
What is the origin of the word marmalade? The word marmalade is originally from... Next slide.
We don't hear you, Adolfo.
Sorry, here I am. Sorry, I was muted.
Please, so, next slide.
Okay, no, just...
I was just saying that I have never thought of that, but I would have assumed that it came from French. I don't know why, but it sounds French to me.
Marmelade.
Because of the
marmelade.
It's related to, yes, it's related to food, and we have some, many words from, food from French. I don't know. I may be wrong, right?
Yeah, it would be right for German. So the German marmelade, in fact, comes from French, but the word is not French. So David, you can tell us. Okay, here's the question. So everyone who wants to think about what do you think is marmalade from? Spanish, Italian, French, Romanian, or Portuguese? Yeah. So, what's the solution, David?
I think David just freezed.
Yeah, I think David is frozen.
So he's
okay, so
okay. While he's back, maybe you can.
Yes, we will. Would you like to explain it, Katharina?
Yeah. So as you can see here, it's a loanword from Portuguese, marmelada. Yeah, and from Portuguese it was borrowed into Spanish, mermelada, French, marmalade, and in German, English, it's obviously from French, but it's not a French word. And the interesting thing about this word is that marmelada is not just any fruit jam, but it's specifically for a jam of quince. You pronounce it quince? Yeah. So it's a very specific type of jam. It's not just strawberry or orange jam, but it's specifically for marmelo. Marmelo is the word for quince. Mm-hmm. And if we go even back, more back in history, so the etymology is quite interesting. Maybe Stefan, you would like to explain the Latin and Greek?
Well, yes. Roots? Well, there is already a Latin word which is melimelum, which already means quince, or which means fruit preserved in honey. And the funny thing about this word is that also in Greek there is melimelon, which is, well, which means honey apple, basically. And the most funny thing is that it comes from the same Indo-European word, which is the root mal, which means soft or sweet. And from this we derive, on the one hand, Greek meli, which is honey, and also the Latin, and melon, apple, and also melis in Latin, and malum, apple in Latin, which basically a quince is a sweet, right? So, but this is what I said in the beginning. We may have the same words and they facilitate intercomprehension, but on the other page, we have phonetical differences that sometimes may cause that the word does sound differently, or no one even recognizes that it is the same word. So we have these two poles we have to bring together in some way if we're talking about intercomprehension and different grades of intercomprehension. Okay, so this is a funny story, which is also comparable to another example, which is similar, which is limonata, which obviously in Italian is a certain type of beverage based on lemons. But in Italy, no one would ever think of calling such a beverage, if it's made of oranges, to call it limonata, as we do in Germany, for example, and in many other European countries. We speak of lemonade and simply refer to the type of beverage, but not to the fruit which it is based on. But it's the same case with mermelada in Portuguese. Limonata is just made out of lemons. And if it's of oranges, it's an aranciata, etc. So we see how changes in meaning also happen once a word is transported to other languages, because it is typically associated with certain types and not necessarily with the specific meaning in a certain language. So this is, I think, marmelada and limonata are two good ways to come to an end, but this can also open the round for further questions, obviously.
I think everybody's hungry now.
Yeah.
You've talked a lot about food.
Is it time, right?
It's also the
okay.
time, yeah.
Let's see. Well, I think that David lost his connection. He may be back in a minute or something.
Let's hope so.
I don't know. So let's just wait for him. Hopefully he'll be back with us. Let's also wait to see if there are any questions coming from the audience or comments. I can pass them on to you for you to answer or comment on them. But while we are waiting for those comments, remind everyone that they can leave their comments in the chat box. Okay, I have a question for you. So how is such lexical transfer and borrowing, the type of lexical transfer and borrowing you mentioned with many examples, facilitate it. So do language families play a role here, or is it due to other reasons, or I don't know?
Katharina, would you like to answer, or shall I?
Yeah, just start and then you complement. So
Okay.
yeah, I think of course within the Romance languages it's much easier to adopt one word to another because they are quite similar. So the morphological structure works similar, and also if it's a word like Stefan said, which already has an Latin origin, so it's easy to incorporate it into a Romance language which just didn't have this Latin continuous, but it's easy to adopt a Romance word from one Romance language to another. And in some cases, we don't even really know which language made up which new word. So Stefan already mentioned before interesse, which was Italian, I guess. But the adjective interessant, so interesting, interessante, interessant, the interesting adjective, it's not really clear. Some say it's a Spanish creation. So Spanish created interessante in the 17th century, and then it passed to French, to Italian. But of course, for French and Italian, interessant, interessante, it's very easy. So it's not really recognized or seen as a loan word, and they feel it as something very natural. So some say, okay, interessant, it's just a French creation because it feels so natural to French. Yeah, there's the verb interesser, interessarse, interest, interest, so the noun, the verb already existing family. So it's much easier to adopt such words.
Yes,
Yeah, I think.
Especially also in cases where, as Katharina said, once the Romance languages existed, they obviously worked differently with the material given to them by Latin. But still, since the languages are related, still, if there comes up a new meaning or a new word, like interesante in Spanish, if we assume that it is from Spanish, it's easily borrowed into other languages. However, we have to say, and this is why we concentrated on vocabulary and lexicon, this is the part of language that is borrowed the easiest. This is why we also have Amerindian words in the European languages, Arabic words in the European languages without any problem, because you can imitate those words and use it in your own sentences. So grammatical borrowing is much more difficult, but even in lexical borrowing, it helps if the languages are related, obviously. So David is back, when we're very glad.
Yes, he's back. He's with us again. Hi, David.
Hi, David.
Okay, we lost you for a second. Okay, we were just commenting on the reasons why this transfer borrowing may be facilitated or not. While we're waiting for questions, I didn't say thank you very much to begin with. I mean, wonderful talk, and I also have a comment. A question or a comment, I don't know. So you made the case clear for this pan-European common lexicon, which is a very interesting idea, I think, especially nowadays that the European concept, whatever that is at stake due to many different reasons. So I was thinking that it would be a very good idea. Okay, David, we lost David again. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has problems, but hopefully he'll be back for the end of the session. So I was thinking that maybe this could be a powerful tool for the European Union to work on that sense of unity among us, because people are not. I mean, I learned many things today, and I'm a linguist. So people are not aware of the fact that we share this common, pan-European common lexicon, as you call it, and we have that thing in common, even though we don't feel it as common, because when we think of French or Portuguese or Italian, we know they're close languages, but they feel them very different from ours. Or when we think of German or English, I mean, far away from ours, even though they also share this common lexicon with us. So I was thinking that it could be a good idea to promote this sense of intercomprehension or sense of unity with primary and secondary school kids, because today's is all about learning English and, of course, your mother language, or the language, the official language or languages of your country, but not that much to foster this intercomprehension. So what do you think about that? Could it be a good strategy or policy to work on this as part of the European project?
Yeah.
With
To
lower
start
levels.
with
I mean, I'm thinking of primary and secondary school kids.
Good question. I think as a perspective, it's very important that we focus on what we have in common. So not just to focus on the differences, but also focusing on what we have in common, on what we share in Europe. So I think this is a very important perspective. We should focus more on that. Yeah. So I don't know.
And absolutely. And in terms of language, not only do most of us share a language from the same family, with only very, very few languages who are not Indo-European, but Finugric, which is obviously Finnish, Estonian, and Hungarian, and Basque is another question. But even these few languages that are not Indo-European, we've been living together for 2,000 years and more. And the Indo-Europeans languages, we all share the same language, just kind of diversified so much that we have different language groups, but they're still Indo-European. But we can see the common patterns. And we've been together so long that every language has taken something from another one. And this is what we all share, as you said. And I think one way to create a European spirit, so to speak, is actually to make us all aware that, hey, we have common linguistic knowledge. We share a lot of things, be it words, be it structures, etc. And depending on the difficulty, of course, you can try to implement this in primary education, because it's often an argument in today's discussion. Keep the languages pure, etc. And then the people give you examples of words that are actually not of this language. Take a German Tür, which means gate, right? This is actually a Greek word, Indo-European, but it's Greek. So if we can create more awareness for this, I think this is a very big step forward, actually.
Also thinking about English, so a huge amount, a very huge percentage of the English vocabulary, in fact, is French. So a lot of English words are French, are Latin. So to start with, even also English is not a pure language. So as Stefan said, this kind of awareness should be could be a first step. Absolutely. Yeah. And of course it could be a good strategy to enter or to start a new language. So if you already know one European language, then you learn another, a second, a third language. It's a very good strategy to focus on what you already know indirectly via the other foreign languages you speak. So it's a very good strategy. Absolutely.
Good. Yeah, because I think that we tend to focus on the European heritage in terms more of, I don't know, philosophical, economic, historical, perspective, but not that much from the linguistic perspective. And we have such, common heritage here that unites us instead of, keep us apart. That it could be a good idea to work on that too, because it's one of the type of heritage that we have.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see if
David.
No, sorry. Yeah, David is missing again. Let's
and a lot of these.
Okay,
he's back.
He's joining us. Yeah, to say farewell at least. I hope. Let's see if he wants to add something. We have. Let's see. Okay, we have a comment or a question. Okay, from the audience. We have a question from Raquel Serrano Lopez from the University of Barcelona. First, she thanks you for the talk, very thought-inspiring, she says. And she has a question, sorry, regarding language contact. Following your words, Stefan. Okay, about isolated languages. So Basque is known to have influenced languages in Spain. Esquerra, izquierda, esquerda from Basque.
Absolutely.
So, do you know, that's her question. Okay, here we have. Do you know if there are any other examples of language isolates that have exerted linguistic influence on neighboring Romance, Germanic, or Slavic languages?
Well, thank you very much, first of all, for the question. And this is exactly what I was saying. Even those languages that are not Indo-European, we've been all together for so long that we always influenced each other. And the influence of Basque on especially Spanish is absolutely evident. And it's not only in the lexicon, because well, it happens with my students in German-speaking countries. Often when I speak about the languages spoken in Spain, I make them listen to someone speaking Basque. And they are completely confused because they think, well, I should understand it. This is Spanish. I must understand it. And I say, no, this is Basque. You can't understand it. But the prosody of Iberian, European Spanish and Basque is so similar. This is really striking. And this is going on for like 2,000 years probably. So first of all, this exactly underpins what I said. In terms of other language isolates, it's more difficult because I think, well, Basque is one of the few we still have, we have in Europe where we do not exactly know where it comes from. So if you define language isolate as a language we do not know where to group it, where to put it, I'm not quite sure if we actually have a second one in Europe. I wouldn't know.
I don't think so.
There are a lot of minority languages, obviously. But I wouldn't know of any other isolate that is still alive, at least. So there might be many substrate influences of Raetic languages, of Messapian, which we do know not a lot of in southern Italy, right? But that's not like diachronic influence. It's, if there is something, it's words passed to us from the past via Latin, via other languages spoken there. For example, Oscan or Greek in southern Italy. So I wouldn't know of any more language isolates that have such a profound impact as it has Basque. However, there is a German scientist, Theo Fennemann, who in some of his hypotheses claims that Basque, or Vasconian as he called it, is the original language of all the continent of Europe. And certain river names like Isère in France, and in Munich, Isar, would come from this language. But, well, this is so in the past, so that we don't know exactly. But this is one hypothesis, at least. So you could say Basque or Vasconian had even more influence, and you can see it's still in some old place names.
Well, I think it's a wonderful metaphor connecting, going back to what we were talking. We may not know where Basque comes from, but we know where it is spoken, and we know that it has influenced other languages. So, just like with people, we may not know where our neighbors come from, or but then there are neighbors, and they're going to influence us, and we are going to influence them, and that's the good thing about living together. So
absolutely.
Okay. Raquel says thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's see if David is joining us again, but If not, I think that we may come to an end now, because yeah, it's an hour and 20 minutes already. So yeah, it's time to go and have something to eat. It's lunch time. It's past lunchtime here, even here in Spain. Here in Spain, so I can imagine that it's past lunchtime there in Austria.
We already had lunch.
Okay, here it is. Okay, here's David.
Okay.
Hi, David. You
He's
are muted.
back, but he's not really.
Okay, he's here at least in presence.
At least we can see him.
Yeah, we can see him,
Yeah.
but we cannot hear him. But okay, so I just want to say thank you again, the three of you. It's been a very interesting talk, webinar. It's completely related to the spirit of this webinar series. And thank you for sharing so much food for thought and inspirational things with us. And to the audience, just to invite you to watch the next webinar series. The next one and the last of this series, of this academic course, will be in June, but we will have another round coming up next year. So be it stream online or as the recording, all the recordings will be available in the YouTube channel. Thank you for joining us. And thank you very much again, Stefan, Katharina, and David. I will give my thanks to him, extend my gratitude to him personally, because he's having problems with his connections.
Yeah, David is writing me on WhatsApp and telling me, he's very sorry.
He's with us, but
he's really trying to get in.
What a pity. Okay, we'll say thanks to him, or you can say thanks to him too. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.